Sure.
Okay. Hi, I'm Cindy Campbell of Cindy Campbell Dog Training,
And I'm Penny Beeman of Uper Paws of Love.
and we're the crazy old ladies of dog training. Um, today's discussion on with our focus around distractions mini workshop is setting our dogs up for success and thinking about the environment in which we're training and we're working with our dogs.
And the distractions in those environments.
And the distractions in those environments. We want our dogs to be learning to be thinking about distractions, but not that they're distractions, that they're, oh, that's none of my business. I don't need to worry about the squirrel that just ran across the road or the goose that just flew down to bite me.
Or name your distraction, because it really doesn't matter what it is. People,
Yes,
cats,
fill in
squirrels,
the
doesn't
blank.
matter.
Kid running by. Basically, we don't have control over the environment most of the time. We have a certain amount of control over it.
We have control over the environments we choose to put our dog in. We don't have
Yes.
control over what happens once we're in that environment.
And sometimes things happen. Just be aware that sometimes, even with the best of planning, things happen and you got to deal with the dog. You
Right.
might get stuck on a place on the trail where there's not a wide spot when you need one. But you want to think about things like if you're going to go walk a trail, you don't want to go walk a trail when there's during the busiest time of day, when everybody's out doing their morning run and bike ride and walking their dog. You want to wait until it quiets down and maybe there's just one or two other people on the trail so that there's fewer distractions for your dog. Now, if your dog has been around and knows how to work around distractions, maybe walking at the busiest time of day isn't a big deal for your dog.
And the point is, you need to start small on a slower trail to be able to teach those leash skills. Because the more that's going on, the more you're going to struggle with getting that nice loose leash that you want, or that heel that you want, or any of the directional cues that you're after. You need to teach those on a slower, less distracting trail, and then slowly amp up or build up to those busier environments.
That's why we, as positive reinforcement dog trainers, often recommend things like starting in your living room and then moving to other rooms in the house, not just because it's, you want a specific quiet training environment.
Controllable area.
Controllable area where when you're training something new, I mean, I've had the utmost interruption in a training session. I was in the middle of a training session and I literally had a 6-point something earthquake where I could see the ground move and the trees shaking interrupt my training session. And I was in the living room in the house. So there's only so much control you can have.
True.
And you cannot predict when an earthquake is, well, there's more prediction now, but at the time there wasn't. So there's only so much control you do have. You want to control what you can, and you want to keep the number of distractions down as much as possible, especially when they're first learning how to do loose leash, how not to react to things. When you start taking them outside, you don't want them going right up to the squirrel the first time you take them outside. You want to maybe keep them back away from the squirrel. Hopefully they've learned about squirrels when they go out on their potty breaks. But
another valid point there, not to get off on a tangent, because this is a tangent, but you also want to make sure that when you're doing those training sessions in your living room or whatever room of the house, that you are in the right frame of mind for that training session. Because if you're annoyed, your dog is going to be annoyed. If you're frustrated before you start the session, your dog is going to get frustrated. So if you need to take a day off from training, give yourself that grace and freedom to do that. You don't want to train something brand new when you're in a negative headspace. Make sure that you're into the whole day of training, what you want to train, and you have the energy to match the skill you're trying to train.
And pain also factors into that with the headspace.
Very much
Because
so. If you're in pain.
if you're in pain, it's very difficult to train your dog. Distance is your friend. And what I mean by that is dogs can handle a lot more stress, if you've got 200 yards between you and the rabbit running across the field versus 20 feet, your dog's far less likely to react to the rabbit that's 200 yards from you than it is to the one that's 20 feet away from you. So understand that if you see something, if you see something coming up that you don't think your dog is going to be able to handle, try and build some distance. It may be going off to the side of a trail. It may be moving across the field. It may be if you're at a pet store, it may be going or doing public access for people with service dogs. It may be going around the corner to another aisle, but you want to avoid moving your dog towards the distraction. You want to move them away from the distraction until they calm down. And you can gradually introduce them to the distraction, but you need to be in the right frame of mind to do that.
Part of that is knowing your dog as well. So if you have that partnership relationship with your dog, you're going to know how much you've worked around a squirrel. So you're going to know exactly how close you can get to that squirrel without your dog losing control or becoming overexcited or going over threshold. But if you haven't done a whole lot of work around, say, I got an unusual one, reindeer, because that's not common in my area, but I happen to have a daughter and son-in-law that have reindeer on their property. So Azul has practiced around reindeer his whole life. But so if you have something like that that's kind of unusual that you've never exposed your dog to before, or that they've never taken note of before, that's when you need to have that bigger 200-yard distance. And slowly, the more you work around that particular distraction, you can shrink that distance to slowly get closer and closer, keeping your dog under threshold and under control the whole time. If they're not under control, you need to move away.
Yeah. And how you can tell if they're under control is, are they listening to you? Are they responding to you? Are they taking treats or rewards, whatever you're using for rewards? This is where actually using a game as a reward can be super, super effective, because by them listening to you and doing what you want, you're giving them an immediate close game that they can do. And they're completely distracted off whatever the distraction is, whether it's
you're making yourself more fun than that distraction.
And you're adding value to you. I mean, ultimately, the end game is with our dogs is that we are the most reinforcing thing on the planet to them. So that when they see the peacock that they want to chase, you can give your recall cue and they come flying to you. Maybe they give you a front, and that because that's what you ask for with the recall, and let you grab their collar and attach a leash and play tug with them. They've got some really cool tuggy leashes that are I don't know if you've seen those, Penny, that
they have like a toy built into it.
No, it's the leash is polar fleece and nylon, like a nylon leash, but it's braided with polar fleece. And so you can use the leash as a tuggy, which that's really cool if you play tug with your dog and you go on walks with your dog, because it's you're already carrying.
Right. And there you have to know the dog, because some dogs will chew through things like that. Some won't. Like Azul has always loved that game. And that's one thing that I've just allowed him to do, because he doesn't do it in an annoying kind of way or chew through it kind of way. So we do a lot of long line work on our property. I talk about that all the time. And when we're approaching the door, that's one of his favorite things to do, is to pick up his line and play tug of war as I walk to the door. That could frustrate me, or I've turned it into a game and allowed it, and we'll kind of just play tug all the way to the door, and it's fun. So I know he's not going to chew through the rope. He's got the soft mouth. I've developed it, and he's not one to turn and bite the leash on a normal walk. He doesn't do that out of frustration. It's only for the game. So you just have to
Whereas,
know your dog there.
and you also have to know your leashes.
Right.
Whereas Nick is never been allowed to do that because he chewed through leashes when he was a puppy. And all my leashes are leather except for maybe 2. So
I would
I
have
don't,
never let my last service dog play that game for the
yeah.
same reason. She would have not been able to control it.
But if you have, there's plenty of tug toys available in a really cheap way. Penny uses t-shirts. I'm lazy. I just usually, because I also like color, I tend to go to the fabric store and get remnants of the polar fleece
Yeah.
and make tug toys. And then
We
if you
talked
lose
about
them,
that in an earlier workshop.
yeah, if you lose them, it's not that bad. It's not the end of the world. So distance is your friend. And as your dog becomes more into you and you become more of the focus, you generally can get closer to distractions because they're more focused. But what you don't want them protecting you, you want them to be, oh, we're having a game. So something that I do, so say you get caught in a situation where I had this happen several times this morning. I think I had it happen about 3 times this morning, just because of where we walk. So I was walking and there was this guy out walking his dog on a retractable leash, and he wasn't really paying attention. He was just letting the dog sniff. It's a sniffy walk in a city park. And it was, but instead of doing the polite thing when people walk by, he was just kind of ignoring that there were people in the park. So knowing Nick has been a bit extra chasey and just kind of grumpy the last week, I put him up on, there were park benches in a couple places. There were these decorative walls. And so we use those for practicing various things. So he's used to getting on and off that. So, and if I tell him to get on it, he'll just get on them. So when this dog was going by twice, because we were doing circles in the opposite directions, twice I stuck him up on the boundaries. And then he just sits there, and then I can ask for things like sits and downs and touches and chin rests and things of that nature. So he's distracted from the distraction. He's focused on me, and he's not, and he's higher than what the perceived potential threat is. So it's one of my favorite things to do. And plus it does some parkour with them. And I don't know that we have talked about parkour.
We have not, but I believe that's one of our games for the night. Not for this night, but for our workshop.
Night. But this is huge in what you do. And you can do 2 paws up. You can do 4 paws up. We have a place where we do rear paws up. And we just have certain games we play at certain places in the park, and we'll try not to make it too routine. And like one of the times that I had Nick on the boundary when somebody was going by, I was working on putting him in a bow. And that's something else that you can teach them. And at the time I was working with him, trying to get him in a bow, there was a dog across the street that was barking at him and lunging. And this is a 4-lane, an intersection of 2 4-lane roads. And the dog was kind of kitty corner to him. And Nick, he's like, I can't focus on doing a bow, but I'll stay up here. But when I saw the dog started barking, we just left. Another great trick to do is if you teach your dog middle, where you have them between your legs. They can be sitting, standing, down. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it down. Being threatened, if the other, whatever the other issue is too close.
However, it makes the dog a little bit more vulnerable.
Yes.
So I almost never call for a down. Azul often chooses it because he likes that better than a sit. And it's easier for
Yeah.
him than a wait, which he's really good at wait. But
I I mostly use downs. I mostly use sits and downs when I'm practicing for rally. Um, I am asking, but we're going to start doing something else. So I am asking for sits now, but when he sees something distracting, but that's regarding this whole other thing he's training for.
right. And I do ask for sits and downs quite regularly, just not when his biggest distraction is present. Like his biggest distraction is other
Right.
dogs. So I won't call for it at that point. I want to get a different behavior that is easier for him to listen to. And usually, if it's a behavior that involves him to move more around me, it's easier for him to listen to that. So
Right.
you want to
And
match the behaviors you're asking for to your dog's abilities around that distraction.
if they can't think, if they absolutely can't think, middle is actually a really good position because you can generally stand with your legs closely around the dog so the dog can't push forward or pull back and hold their collar at the same time. So you can have a leash and a collar and the dog can't get away from you. And that's one of the reasons I like it. And they can stand in middle. There's no reason they can't stand in middle. They
Right.
actually ideally should be standing in middle.
I train that as a default position. Anytime I'm not real sure about our surroundings or if I'm not
Mhm.
really paying attention to the dog exactly, like say I'm using a self checkout or something with Azul being
Right.
a service dog, I can put him in a middle in between my legs. And then if a distraction comes up, I feel it. I don't have to be watching him or holding his leash tightly because I'm going to feel
Exactly.
anything that happens, even if he moves just slightly.
And I use it when I unlock my front door because bad mom here, I take most of his gear, including his leash, off as after I unlock the door. So that's kind of his reward. I open the door and he can go through because he
Right.
thinks going through the door is rewarding. But middle is just, it's a super, super useful behavior. And if you haven't taught your dog to get in between your legs, it's super easy. You can ask either one of us. We're more than happy to help you. But basically you just lure it and it gives them a lot of security when they can feel that a little bit of pressure. They know, okay, my mom or dad is there for me and we can do this, we can get through this.
Azul actually uses it as a reinforcement position because when
Mhm.
I cue that, he knows I'm going to be scratching his chest while he's there. So if he wants a chest scratch, he'll offer that behavior in a training session or a work session as well. One day we were playing kind of like leapfrog with a couple of other dogs that we train with quite regularly. So the person in the back would go past the other two dogs, and those other two dogs were holding a sit or a down or a stay, standing stay, whatever their person wanted them to do. Well, the dog in the back would walk past everybody, and then the dog that walked past would then hold position, and it was just, the person in the back was always moving up. So we were doing that one time, and as I cued Azul that it was our turn to let's go, he dove between my legs, and we actually walked past all those dogs with him in between my legs the whole way.
You did like 20 feet, didn't you?
Yeah, it was like 20, 30 feet, just like that. Like after the first 10, he was like ready to back out. I'm like, no, you started this. Let's keep it up. And he happily complied. We walked the
And
rest of
I've
the way.
had Nick do that in checkout lines before.
Right.
And it's a really useful position. Nick tends to start to offer it and get stuck halfway through when he wants his gentle leader off. But that's another story.
Right.
So again, we're back at you want to choose the environment and the distractions that you can control. So if you know your dog's never seen a reindeer, you want to choose how you introduce your dog to the reindeer. You probably don't want to just walk up to the reindeer.
And if you don't have reindeer in your environment, you may never train that.
Yeah, you may
Especially
train
if your
other
dog is not
deer.
a service dog and you're not planning on ever taking them to a zoo or a petting zoo or anything like that. So,
Well, okay, so here in California, there are a couple places where There's a rare white deer from Germany. Hearst Castle comes to mind, and a small county park in Northern California or Bay Area. And at least at the park in the Bay Area, your dogs can approach those deer. And they're really cool.
We have an enclosure like that too that Azul's been walking around since he was a puppy. And I take a lot of the other dogs I work with because it's probably about 4 acres enclosed, and you can walk all the way around the outside with a 30-foot fence in between you and the deer. And the deer don't mind as long as the dogs aren't barking and carrying on like fools. And our training is always based on keeping that dog calm and comfortable anyways, and using distance to get that. So we've even had deer like walk up and lick the dogs.
Yeah. And one of my big things I want, no matter whether the dog's a service dog or not, you never know what you're going to see walking down the street. I had my last service dog on a trip to Las Vegas. We walked out of the hotel room and we were going to go walk on the Strip. And as I'm coming out of the hotel, you came out on the second level and there's a guy standing outside kind of panhandling, and he's got this huge boa constrictor and he's wanting me to pat the boa constrictor. And I'm like, I've already patted a boa constrictor. Well, my dog could have totally freaked out because where I live, there's rattlesnakes and all kinds of stuff that's kind of dangerous to dogs.
And that's a huge snake.
And she's a farm bred Great Pyrenees, which kind of, their job's protecting things. So, she probably wasn't real thrilled about the snake, but she didn't react to it. And I've had encounters with all kinds of stuff. I mean, I can't even tell you the number of things I've seen at PetSmart. And, you just never know. And then if you add the fact that service dogs go pretty much everywhere with their handlers, it just quadruples what you might run into. So, it's really good to have them like not freak out over animals. It's also really good to have them not freak out over loud noises or kids running and yelling. And if you do find those things are causing some issues, then you need to step back and maybe find a way to recreate that and find training partners
in a safer environment.
Work with you in a safer environment, safer, more controlled environment. Like I'm having an issue with my dog right now that doesn't particularly like men running by yelling. So I'm going to see if my nephew, who's in his early 30s, will run by my dog and yell in the park or in the parking lot. And it's coming up with creative solutions like that to deal with it, to learn to teach your dogs, this is.
And the importance with that kind of thing is that you're using somebody that so you can ask them to do certain things like stay at this distance, or, all right, first walk past and then go a little bit faster, and then maybe a little bit faster and add in the yell, so that they can follow your directions, basically.
Now put the big floppy hat on and, let's make this, so everything goes slow and you're building on it and you're building on the skills you're developing. It doesn't mean it won't happen again, but it definitely will make it easier for the dog.
And you can work at that distance that your dog can be successful as well.
Right. It's like breaking things down when you're shaping a new behavior. You want to break the distraction down as much as possible. Maybe you have a reactive dog and you have to start a football field away from another dog. Well, guess what? You don't even have to tell that other dog what you're doing. If they're 50 feet away, just kind of stay back and watch your dog as they do their thing and continue, because we want to train for the moment, not in the moment. But you also need to have skills in case there's an issue. And if something does happen, you need to just get out of there. Even if you're 50 yards away, you need to just get out of there to a safer distance where your dog is calmer.
If your dog is reacting at 50 feet away, you should be working at 60 feet away.
Or 70.
Or 70. Yeah. Wherever your dog can be calm and still work with you. You can
And-
eventually shrink that distance. The other important thing that we haven't really touched on tonight is that you have to have a pretty high value reinforcement available during those setup training sessions where you're working with a friend or family member that you can give direction to, because that high value is going to slowly change your dog's opinion of whatever that distraction is. So instead of that distraction being threatening, it's going to become, oh, I see this weird man running by with a floppy hat. That means I'm going to get chicken, or whatever it is. Yeah. Oh, I see this dog jogging by with a bike. Oh, that means I'm going to go play with my tug toy next. Whatever their high reinforcement is, you need
and
to
not
mirror that
all
direction.
and not all dogs are food motivated. I'd be careful on moderate. You want them high energy, and you want them to respond and enjoy what you're asking them to do with the reward. However, I'd be very careful when you're using high value toys and tugs. You don't want to put that can also, if they're already amped up from whatever is causing the issue, that can easily put them over threshold. And then that's a whole nother set of problems.
Correct.
That's why
When you're using high value like that, you also have to be able to help bring them back down. When it's a high value tug toy or a toy where you're amping them up a little bit, you might be able to amp them up slightly if that helps you to build in some more distance, and with that distance, you can bring them back down. So that takes a lot of practice and skill, something you have to work up to. And that's why most people will use food in that kind of situation, even if it has to be steak or sardines or something to that effect,
and
because
some
it's
dogs
easier to do.
and some dogs just won't respond to food at that level.
Right.
Nick, it does not take Nick. Nick's not a foodie, and it doesn't take him much to go over his food, what he will tolerate as a food reward, and when food becomes punishment. So so today I was taking one of my classes with one of my trainers, and we were doing a mock CGC with Nick, and one of his big rewards is to be allowed to jump on me, because I don't allow it very often. So that's a super high value reward for him. And he just gets really bouncy when we do it. So, and he was super excited because at the time I did it, there was a puppy coming in. So puppy. Penny's been dealing with the puppy for the last week.
Yes.
So he was getting excited about the puppy, and he was excited because I had left for 3 minutes and I came back. And so he was excited to be getting rewarded for that. And then he got to run. And then because we did some sit stays, down stays, and a recall, and he got to run in the recall. So he was really amped up for me. So when I gave him permission to jump up, he was doing the whole poodle bounce. So you need to, and I was expecting it. I knew what to expect, but you need to be prepared that if you're giving a high energy reward, when you have a high energy dog and you're in a high energy situation, you need to be prepared to tone the high energy down a little bit as needed and be able to keep it toned down. And there's ways to do it. Again, I think we probably have this coming up. Do we have some disengagement coming up, Penny?
Yes. So
Okay,
tomorrow
so.
night's thing is all about exercises to help you that you can do during those training sessions around distractions. So it'll help with disengagement and the better focus around those distractions by doing the simple exercises we'll have tomorrow night or tomorrow day.
And
we're so used to training at night that it's hard for us to remember that this particular workshop is being released at 8 a.m. so that you have all day to work on it. You can access the materials at 8 a.m. or you can wait and access the materials anytime throughout the day at 8 p.m. or whatever. They're still there
Whatever
for you,
works
what
for
works for
you.
you. So pick a time that fits into your schedule well, where you're not stressed. You don't have to check in right at 8 a.m. when the resources are released. And that's 8 a.m. Central with daylight standard time. So you kind of have to fit that into whatever
Well,
time zone you live in.
I think daylight savings time is going away, actually.
For us, it's quite the opposite. It's going to become the normal. Everything is going to be daylight savings time for
It's
Michigan.
going to be, yeah, well, that's what the whole country's going to.
Yeah. Michigan has it on the works already. It's been approved in one, and I don't remember Senate or House. It's been approved by one and just waiting for
Senate.
approval in the other.
The Senate approved it. Okay.
But shall we
Yeah,
talk
fine,
about our
but I was-
games for tonight?
Yeah, I can't find my list on the games.
That's okay. I'll tell you what your game is.
And
I'll
what
go
is
through my
game?
game really quickly first.
Okay.
That's what we've been doing.
Anyway.
You're leading it. I'll do my game first, and then next time we switch. So my game for the night that is going to help with this is a pace change game. So for me, I call it the quick, slow game because that's really the first two paces I start with. So the reason I use quick is because I'm trying to amp my dog up. So he learns that double cue, whenever I give a double cue like that, which is very rare, but it's always more of a high energy. So I never say the word quick by itself when I'm talking to Azul, because when I need him to hurry up, I want that energy level. So I'll go quick and pick up my pace. And he's typically in a heel or at least a loose heel when I do it. So he'll match my heel speed. And I will post a video of this. I just was teaching a few of my other star pupils how to play this game. So I have a couple of videos, one of Azul doing it and one of a couple of other dogs doing it for the very first time. But so I'll go quick, and we'll do that quick pace, maybe 10 feet, maybe 15 feet, kind of, just it's a variable distance because I want him paying attention to me, not the exact feet that we always do. So I keep it changing. And then all of a sudden I say, stop. And I stop really quick. Imagine stopping on a dime, putting the brakes on, we all out, stop. And sometimes I will, like if we're in a more distracting environment, I'll just lay my hand on his back when I say stop, because that helps him feel it. If my hand is sliding on his back, he knows I stopped and he hasn't stopped yet. And a lot of times I don't do that. But if I think it's going to be hard for him, I'll do that to give him that feeling that we're stopping. And then we'll maybe turn left and do quick again and stop, and quick and stop. And then after that, I slowly add in a few other pace changes. So the next one I do is a slow, and it's kind of like a slow motion where I pick my foot up, but instead of immediately putting it down, I'm moving it almost like that slow motion camera where it takes me a good long time to move it, my step, and put it back down, and then do the next foot. And the dog has to do that slow. And then all of a sudden from the slow motion, we amp right back up again and do the quick. And since Azul knows left and right and some other directional cues like that, I can throw those in at any speed we're doing it. So whether I'm in slow-mo or full speed, or when we're just starting out at a normal speed after we've done a quick stop, we keep changing it up, and that helps develop that focus on you versus everything else in the environment. You can play it with any cues your dog knows. So the quick, slow is where I start. So your game for the night is A to B or U-turn games.
Okay, this is a really super important one, actually. So this is an emergency cue, but it's something that should be practiced on a regular basis. It's an exercise in rally. I think every dog should know how to do it. And basically what you're doing is you're walking along, you see something you may not like, your dog's getting a little bit too interested. Maybe you have your leash in your right hand and your dog's on the left, or however your dog is set up. I typically slide the hand that's closest to the dog down the leash and hold the leash in the other hand. And I kind of bend over with them and I call them around with me. I use let's go, whatever your cue is to move out of the way, and have them come around with me. And and you go rather quickly when you do this. And you want to practice doing that so you get them in the habit of when you slide your hand down the leash, you're going to make that U-turn. What that does is it teaches them that when you do slide your hand like that, you're going to get you guys are going to make a turn, an about turn, and go the other direction. You can go either direction. You should probably practice either direction. And sometimes it's actually easier to do it and turn into the dog and go so that you're staying between the dog and whatever the distraction is. And as a rule of thumb, when possible, I like to be between my dog and the distraction so that
especially in close range.
Especially in close range, because the chances are another dog's not going to turn and bite you where it might turn and bite your dog. Unfortunately, not everybody does that, but if you can do this where you just slide your hand down and you either turn into your dog or away from your dog, but practice both ways, because sometimes you can do one and not the other. And going the other way, I mean, I probably do this 5 or 6 times a day, just because it's really good to do if you're working on a heel or a loose leash and your dog has a tendency to pull you a little bit. If you slide your hand down and call them towards you while you're doing this, they'll come with you because they're amped up and they're like, ooh, mom's here, and they'll go with you. And so this adds value to you. If you want to and you have them, I wouldn't go buy them. You can set out little orange cones and practice around those, but you don't have to. And we
use trees and things in the environment to do it as well.
I use environmental objects as well. I use cats as a distraction, but that's a whole nother subject.
I actually play this game as part of my positions game that we did the other day. So when my dog is totally off leash and I'm using hand targets to get him where I want to be, we'll do a hand target to do that quick turn and walk the other way. And then that also works really well when you're turning into your dog, because as you put your hand out and start to turn, they realize you're stepping into their space and they can turn before you do, so you're not stepping on them. Mm-hmm. Since we practice a lot that way, I use the same hand target when we need to do it out in public because we see a distraction.
And for those with service dogs, this is a really handy tool if you're going down an aisle. And I don't know, you've probably met them, Penny. I know I've met plenty of people who either they're excited to see the dog or they're freaking out because the dog is in the store they don't expect the dog to be in.
Like today, we were walking inside a mall and all of a sudden we had, it was us, me and Azul, and then the owner of the puppy I've had and Puppy. And I see coming at us this family, and this family has 3 little kids. I would say one of them was like a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 4-year-old, and they were all on the backpack leash themselves. Plus they had several older, not quite teenager, but a couple of them were teenagers. It was a big group. So like 8 people all walking with us, and these little kids all at the full length of their, 5-6 foot strap to the person they were connected to.
They weren't on retractables?
No, they weren't retractables, thankfully. But yeah, so there was a younger child, I would put her at maybe 10 to 12, holding one of the smaller children, and that smaller child was just kind of running amok, whereas the adults quickly shortened their handle on the kids that they had, just like it would be dogs. They shortened it. But here, this probably the youngest child too, was maybe only 2, is running straight at Puppy. And Puppy and Azul both love kids so much that it overexcites them, being a little bit too much for Puppy to handle in that environment, I quick stepped in front of them, putting Azul there so that if they did reach us, they were contacting Azul first because he could handle it better. But it was just something we totally didn't expect. You know, we were in a public place. We were in a mall, actually. So very public and lots of people we couldn't control. But to see that big of a crowd coming at us and almost invading our space instantly, it's one of those distractions you don't plan for or predict. You know, Azul has had lots of practice with kids, but we never expected to see this come along.
You've planned for it because you've trained Azul how to deal with it.
Right.
But
Right. But this was
but
a
it's
little
not
bit beyond
predictable.
what we've planned.
Right. But so there's plenty of, I will get a video of A to B up tomorrow. And well, I'll put it up. Anyways, so it's a really good safety skill, but it's also, it's a nice reinforcing skill. And if you take your dog in public, either dog friendly public places, if they're a pet or if they're a service dog, to wherever you tend to go, say Marine World or to SeaWorld or to, you know, Disneyland, they need to know how to deal with crowds. And this is a good way to have them like be able to exit if you see something coming that you need to deal with.
Yes, we do a lot of it. Now,
And
Azul, if it's with his biggest distraction, which you guys all know it's dogs, we're on day 3 here, so I talk a lot about Azul coming into dogs. He really struggles with a U-turn if it's a dog he's never met before. So instead of actually doing the full U-turn, we'll turn at a 90-degree angle in that high distraction environment because that works better for him. He can still kind of see the distraction, but we're able to add that distance that we need to make it safe for everyone.
Nick has the same issue. I mean, he has a different issue, but his same issue is dogs. And so it's just, and it's typical of adolescent dogs to have issues.
They haven't learned all the social graces yet.
No, they're like teenage kids. They haven't learned everything, and especially boy dogs, you know, they're like teenage boys. They just don't know when to stop.
Are you saying they have a one-track mind?
Probably. That testosterone's a pretty powerful hormone. But, you know, and that's our job is, you know, they're born into the canine world. They don't know how to function in the human world. We expect them to come out pre-trained, especially border collie owners, because they act like border collies act like they came out pre-trained. Poodles pretty much too, but there's a certain level, you know, and it's, you know, service dogs are more susceptible to a lot of this as well because they're in environments that other dogs are not in, and they have to function in an environment that other dogs don't at a much younger age. And so distractions are a really big thing to train with. And I know somebody who used to work for guide dogs, and she said every dog that went through the program at one point or another had these issues. You know, what you see on the guide dog show, I forgot what the movie's name is. You know, they show you the best of the dogs behaving themselves. One of the dogs
with Facebook accounts. Everybody puts their best videos forward. You don't see people making mistakes very often. I try to share those mistakes because I want people to learn from my mistakes so they don't have to make the same mistakes. But most trainers will not do that.
Nick has had a significant problem with Huskies for a variety of, because he's had some bad encounters with the variety of Huskies. And today he was taking a mock CGC he would have passed, but we were walking by and there was a not so nice Husky, and Nick has been not quite himself for at least the last week. And he couldn't control himself while we were in the presence of the Husky. So in a matter of, I'd say 5 feet, he reacted and calmed down. And then we walked immediately past cats, and he didn't care about the cats. And so I know he couple weeks ago, he got snapped at by a husky. So, and lunged at, and there was another dog in the same, in the class that also got lunged at by the same husky. And then he got kind of growled at by one of the dogs in the class that he doesn't get along with. They don't have to get along with everybody. But we do need to be aware of what our dog's weaknesses are, so that if we can potentially avoid those issues, we do, because dogs will be dogs, and we can train them to a certain extent, but they have, you know, just like we do, they have emotions, they have feelings, they have reactions, and we want them as non-reactive as possible, but sometimes it takes longer.
And everybody reacts. Even we as people, we all react. If we're having a bad day pain-wise or health-wise, we're going to react poorly. If we're having a great day where we feel awesome, we might react to that same distraction better. We might even enjoy that distraction. You know, everybody reacts, every dog reacts. So it's a matter of controlling the reaction or getting past the reaction in a somewhat, you know, in that under threshold, somewhat under control, even if it's the dog self-controlling himself. I don't mean under control as he's my dog and I have Azul under control. I mean, the dog is able to control himself around the distraction is the goal.
It's the goal. It's just, it's, they should just, what we're doing with young dogs is we're teaching them how to respond and what we expect. And, you know, personally, had that not been, you know, I had my evaluator behind me, following me, and she had directed me to specifically to walk by this dog. And I had specifically questioned putting Nick on my right side instead of my left, and she said, fine. So I did. And that was just so I could be between him and the other dog. And the other dog's person was in line and wasn't paying attention to it. So it reacted to Nick, and Nick responded to it. However, had I not been taking a test, I would not have, and had I not been directed to walk Nick by that dog, I would not have walked Nick by that dog.
Correct, because it's a dog you can't control. You don't know what they're going to do.
I have no idea how that dog is going to respond.
And you know it's a problem area for Nick.
And I know it's Nick's problem. Correct. I know it's Nick's weakness. So
always set your dog up for success. Don't ask them to do something that you know is beyond their ability to do.
And try and use the tools we've given you. Refer back as much as you need to what's going on, because they're good tools, they work. And it's, the ADA doesn't say your dog has to be perfect. It says it has to be under control of the handler. Being under control of the handler is not, doing your best to set the dog up so that, the skipping child doesn't come by demanding to pat your dog. If the handler, if the child is doing that, that's what management in the store's for.
Right.
But avoid the situation. If you know the situation is going to cause a problem, avoid it if you can.
Right.
You can't always, but if you can. So what I did in the situation was I just hightailed out of it, and because Nick couldn't think, he didn't know what to do. And he was on a flat collar. He wasn't on his gentle leader because he was taking a mock test. And the thought was, well, let's see how he does. I was kind of joking around before. Well, if he passes, what are you going to do if he passes? Then he passes. I'm like, okay. So I wasn't, so we have to do it again.
Oh, well.
So what? It's not the end of the world.
I think we should kind of wrap up here, being that I know this one is kind of long.
We did another long one.
Hope you had fun.
Yes.
We want to thank you for participating in day 3 of the Focus Around Distractions workshop. We do want to remind you that this is a mini workshop, so the tools and resources and tips that we're giving you are just a bare minimum of some things that can help you. There's no way we could go over everything that would help you in 4 days. So we do have additional resources available to you, and we'll talk more about that in another workshop we're putting together. But so just keep in mind, if you like what you're seeing and you want more information, either Cindy or I can help you get that more information. And otherwise, we hope you just are enjoying this, and it gives you a place to start with the distractions that are in your life and in your dog's life. Anything else there, Cindy?
It just, keep practicing. The games are good. And especially what we mentioned today they're not just games. They're things that will help you out in an emergency situation when you need to get your dog out of Dodge.
Right. Everything should start out as a game. All dog training should be fun. Our dogs learn better when they're fun.
Yeah.
And usually we can put those games to use in real life if we've practiced them enough. So when the workshop ends, don't stop playing. We want you to play these games at least once on the day that we talk about them, but continue to play them. And most of them, you can start out simple and build to them. So keep doing it and keep doing it, and let us know what you think about these games.
Yeah.